Okay, so today is another podcast from Silent Ego, the soul of the entrepreneur and life beyond the spreadsheet. We've got a bit of a twist today. We've got a new world investment business called One Planet with us, and we've got the investment director, Anthony Chant, and the founder, Ed Stevens, who basically represent, in my view, new world investment.
I think what we're really excited about is we're working with some really, really exciting businesses at the moment, but that are making really big environmental impact. And I think the thing that's fundamentally exciting is looking 5-10 years ahead and saying, right, to see a group of those companies out there actively combating climate change. And that was the rationale to start this all along, was to really try and help facilitate some of these companies really move forward. So 5 to 10 years, a group of companies making huge change to the environment, to climate change. That's inspiring. That's what's exciting.
Yeah. And what's it been like, you know, from setup, and because you're entrepreneurs, and here we go again. You know, you've been around for about a year, and you know, from looking at your portfolio, you've got some really good traction already, and some great things are starting to happen. But what's that been like? You know, with that. You know, bringing it all to life, basically.
I wouldn't say it's been easy. There's a lot of regulatory hurdles you have to go or jump over in order to set up and incorporate a fund. But that aside, it's about identifying and finding the right type of business, the type of business that will, you know, contribute to net zero. We've all got to do our bit in whatever shape or form that takes. And then obviously there's the money raising side of it as well, which is, I mean, none of these are easy tasks, but we've got a good team behind us, with us, working with us. And
I'd say it's equally challenging, if not more so, than previous companies we founded.
Right.
I think if you choose to found a company in an area, you're generally familiar with it, you have some idea of the technologies. I think with this, I mean, obviously, like setting up a fund is a different domain, and doing so without a track record. We're not, finance professionals by trade. We're business people. We've had successful business careers, and we've looked to start up a fund with a difference. And I think actually the hurdle's been bigger, but like really rewarding. Like really excited to have it up and running now.
So you're sort of actively engaging with entrepreneurs. Of your world, you're creating your ecosystem. You're actually starting to sort of make it, some relatively early stage investments, but it's looking quite healthy for you. How do you go about, sort of for our listeners and viewers of this podcast, how do you actually go about identifying the business environments, and what would you say ethically is your selection criteria for bringing new businesses into your portfolio for investment?
Yeah, I'd say there's two things. For us, any conversation with the business, it starts in terms of the chemistry with the people. And I think, frankly, we have license to do this because we're entrepreneurs by background, but I think we generally know within 20 minutes, half an hour of a conversation, whether you really think you're going to be able to put money behind the people in front of you and whether you really believe in them.
Right.
Of course, the confidence evolves over a conversation and you get into more detail, but I think we're just looking fundamentally whether it's a team that's got credibility, but whether you can really believe in them.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So if we zero in on that, Anthony, about people, what are the hallmarks that you look for? You go into these business environments, you're talking, you meet a lot of very passionate, sort of highly energetic individuals that, want you guys to work with them and help them create their sort of their vision of the future. What would you say your characteristics are that you look for in people? I mean, I'm a passionate fan that, I'm in the people business, so it's all about P2P for me. And it's nice to hear that you're people-centric. So what would you say the characteristics are for investing?
It's quite difficult. It's something you feel in the gut, but it is all about people. You can have a great idea, but it's in the execution. You've got to have the right person or people in the team in order to execute. We've done countless phone calls and Zoom calls with lots and lots of entrepreneurs, and sometimes you get that feeling that they're going to be a good, safe pair of hands. Mm-hmm. It's almost intangible.
Right.
I don't know quite how to describe that one, really.
So it's instinctful, is it?
Yeah,
Do you
for me it is.
I think it's interesting. The experience we've had since we've had the first fund, if we reviewed the first 4 investments,
Right.
that gut feel has felt very right, actually, if we look in retrospect. That when we apply all the traditional rigour when you go through due diligence looking at a business, actually, if you come back to some of that instinctive appraisal at the start, generally it correlates that it's matched. And I think that's, again, why bringing more business people into the world of investing is really important, because actually they're 2 different disciplines. If your trade is as an investor, or if your trade is I've run successful companies,
Yes.
and you're pivoting, I think there's real merit to that. But I think honesty and passion are a couple of things that really grab me. That there are so many people out there who will just pitch a story, talk, sales. And I think it's people who are braver who can talk openly about, we're not there yet. Technology's a bit far off, but we think we've got the right idea. And I think it's real courage when you get someone in front of you saying, talking with honesty about the business and where the faults are, that actually I then have more conviction to invest or feel like that. So
That's interesting. So it's quite a heart-centric, it's like a non-ego-centric sort of view of assessing an investment.
It's the same process you go through in a job interview, which you would have done many times.
Absolutely, yeah.
You get that feeling within the first 5 minutes of whether you're probably going to hire that person or not.
Interesting.
It feels similar. Obviously, you have to do the due diligence and make sure that whatever you felt in your gut is true.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I think Ben and I would share that today. You're here because we felt the same. So it's quite interesting how that ripples. One Planet, I think, is a cool name. I really do. And I think, from what we've looked at, some of your investments look super interesting. It's possible just to expand a little bit on that so we can give our audience, when they listen to this, some sort of intelligence on where you are investing and what those initiatives look like.
Do you want to do the first 2? And I can
So I look after 2 investments we have in the portfolio, a business called Zedify and another one called Good Club. 2 really exciting businesses. So Zedify is zero emissions deliveries to your door. So on e-bikes in sort of city centre environments, so it could be Southampton, Brighton, Oxford, Cambridge. And the vision or the future of that world is, wait a minute, city centres aren't going to allow big diesel emitting vans sat in traffic. It's really inefficient. It's not the future. Councils are already forbidding it. So if you look at London, congestion charging zone, ultra low emission zone, there is no future where the DPDs and the FedExes of this world are going to sit there with big diesel vans sat in the streets. So there's this big pivot towards these e-trikes, e-powered bikes delivering. And Zedify have really caught a march on that. So they've got some super cool technology. They're able to offer 1-hour delivery time slots. So instead of us all waiting for a full day and getting a message from, we might be there in the afternoon between this 3-hour window, they're able to be a lot more focused on time delivery because they run these inner city centre hubs and they do it with bikes. Really excited. It's going to make a huge difference in reducing emissions. So really exciting business based up in Cambridge. The other business called Good Club, again, exciting in the space of ethical consumption. So what got us was how horrified we are when you take your recycling out every week and you've got tons and tons of plastic and cardboard and, it starts to make you feel a bit sick actually with the volume of it. Good Club are saying we can do a monthly delivery to your door, or more frequently if you want to, of pantry items. They deliver it in a crate, reusable canisters, which you then decant. So flour, rice, pasta, herbs, spices, detergents. So all of that, you decant at home, none of the packaging. Crate gets collected, you send back.
Very good.
So again, exciting idea, really looking to disrupt that kind of grocery market and really appeal to us all now about, is there a different way to do our shopping that reduces, that kind of plastic, single-use plastic wastage?
I think that's fantastic. It's almost like back in time, isn't it? Horse and cart pulls up and like you get your scoop out and you get your pan out, your container out and you fill it up and you go. I think that's a super
and it
concept.
feels, conceptually, one of the things we do when we do things like due diligence, we really try and experience the service. So we all immediately signed up, ordered, go through the whole kind of cycle.
Right.
Feels cumbersome. But actually, you do the first delivery, it's inspiring. You think,
that's good.
Made a bit of a difference here. It's really efficient. You've got all these decanted goods. So, I think a couple of really good examples there. I feel really lucky we found those companies. So,
Oh, that sounds
that's kicked
fascinating.
off really well.
That's really good.
Yeah, I've got a couple I could talk about. One is a Southampton-based business called Rad Propulsion. So marine EV, they make electric outboard motors. Easy on the eye,
Yes.
very aesthetically pleasing outboard motors, and they'll cater for sort of day boats right down to paddleboards. So you strap a small electric motor on the back of your paddleboard, and once you get tired, you move over to that. So that's an exciting sort of Tesla of the sea type investment that we've made. And the other one is called Earthly. So this is a carbon offsetting business. So you identify as a business where you're producing most of your carbon, and then you find schemes and ways in which you can offset it. So that might be funding the replanting of a rainforest in the Amazon, for example. So they've identified these projects which you can then invest in.
Yeah, it must give you a good sense of accomplishment. You're making a significant difference there. I mean, the 4 businesses there, and I can immediately resonate with, wow, I get it. That's super cool, and I think it's nice to be participating in the experience. Meaning, I believe in it, so therefore I'm going to bring the investment in. It's sort of like there's a lot of conversation out in the market now about in the wider world about being heart centric about things, and as we move from sort of ego to eco, if you don't mind me saying that, it's nice to hear that One Planet are practicing its values. So the principles of practice are really nice and earthy, which is, in my world, is quite unique. Being candid, I'm sure there's similar businesses, but you are representing a great cause, and it's really interesting. So coming back to the people side of it, I mean, how do you scale these businesses? Do you influence scale? Do you? And the reason I ask the question is because there's a lot of our audience that when they listen to this podcast, they're going to be quite senior executives that candidly are actually working in multinational businesses that have an appetite to work for and advise and work with businesses not too dissimilar to yourselves when, you find the, the environment and you're looking to potentially, it's common for a practice like yourselves to put in advisors or somebody on the board of the business to help steer with domain expertise. I mean, is that something that you're going to be building as you march forward with the business?
Yeah, it gives us huge confidence when
Right.
you see people involved in the business, particularly if they've been angel investors,
Right.
who bring industry experience from a larger environment. To us, that really increases confidence. So one of the businesses we invested in, they have probably a really great example for some of your listeners, but the guy was FTSE 100 logistics, huge background in the industry, had been the president of the Industry Trade Association, completely wanted a change in life, went into angel investing, he'd made some good money, and he's involved with one of the businesses. And to us, to see someone like that bringing that corporate experience, it's another layer. We then can have some informal discussions, so myself, Ed and Matt, we can bring our own experience to play, but we're not necessarily from those industries. So we'd love to see more executives coming into this market who are potentially angel investing, involved with the company, might be doing a day a week. Another business can think of another example. They're doing a part-time type of CFO role. It's not a full-time requirement. Maybe it'll evolve, but we want to see more executives seeing if we can support that ecosystem.
That's very good, and I think that as we sort of march through this podcast, and I think it's important for our listeners to understand that because in our world, and one of the reasons why we're looking to collaborate with One Planet going forward is we do get that request. We get the corporate exec that is potentially a high net worth individual, or he's invested in similar environments in the past and wants to now change his direction of career and wants to get involved with certain initiatives that potentially One Planet would be looking to invest in. There's a bit of a it's interesting because the corporate execs sometimes are a bit apprehensive about that. They've got this wonderful domain expertise. They're relatively high net worth individuals and often can be a bit apprehensive about making that leap. It's nice to hear that you've got that sort of very open door approach to, we're investing in these businesses, and yes, we welcome the opportunity to talk to, key individuals for 2 reasons. Obviously the skill set and the influence that brings, but clearly the investment as well. So, I always call it follow the money. And it's nice to hear it firsthand that you're creating that nice, our line of sight is the green revolution, and I think from our perspective, it will be really warming to hear that. Going back to when people pick up on this podcast, that you guys are to watch and are one to watch. But with that in mind, what does the next 12, 24, 36 months look like for you at the minute?
So it's about scaling.
Right.
We need to raise more money.
Okay.
Deploy more cash into more businesses to contribute to that net zero goal. And ultimately, it is all about money.
So how do we, using the word energy, money, energy, how do you go about sourcing that? I mean, so, once again, our audience is listening to this thinking, you know what, this is a cool business. How do I go about sort of investing or coming forward to discuss, I want to invest in your portfolio or the future plans of One Planet? How do they do that?
Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so traditionally people have accessed these types of investments via IFA networks and traditional financial intermediaries. We're open to that, but I think there's still a lot of education in the market about it, because I think there's two things. People still potentially perceive, green revolution we're talking about as, okay, is it still a charitable endeavour? What's it going to do? Is there actually a return from a money point of view? And that's not widely accepted in what I'd call mainstream financial intermediary world. So we're trying to do a lot of work to put out some education out there and sort of say, wait a minute, look, we're at a really interesting inflection point. There's huge legislation. There's a real stick now from governments all over the world about going to net zero.
Right.
The economy itself has to change, and this is happening. And so we're trying to kind of really emphasise that there's equally a commercial opportunity with this. So that sort of starts to educate that financial intermediary world, but also start to try and get people more confident to invest directly into funds. So one of the things we found really interesting, we were told when we set up the fund, no, you'll have to go through IFAs, it's all going to be financial intermediaries. Actually, we've had a lot of direct applications to the fund. So people who've got that environmental conscience and go, I want to do something. There's something happening with climate change.
Right.
But actually, there's an opportunity here as well. And so we've had more direct applications into the fund because of some of the work we do, trying to put that education out there. But, it's a lot of work via that IFA network, and there's more education to be done. But what's interesting is the direct access. I think people are taking action.
That's really good. And what's your kind of entry level for investment? What would, for a high net worth individuals listening to this thinking, yeah, I'm really interested in, these guys are good guys. So, following the...
In terms of a monetary amount, we take investments starting at as little as £10,000.
Right.
That's lower than other funds, and that was deliberate. I think some funds say, oh no, it's cumbersome. We want to set a higher ceiling and less work. We want to take bigger tickets. I think we accept that there's a role we have to play here to enable a bit more access. So we've tried to set that bar lower to encourage more people to come. It's more work, but I think that's a role we have to play here.
Is that sort of like a cultural feel for you as well? Kind of in my world, in the investment community, you've got the rock stars out there that can be a bit brittle, if you don't mind me saying that, from an experience perspective. They're very stiff to deal with, and it's just the way they are. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just you feel, very earthy. I know that sounds a bit of a cliche, but the point is you do have this sort of very open, kind of feels fair and friendly sort of approach to what you're doing and how you're going about it. Is that a deliberate, conscious act? Is that not act in the false sense, but more in the ethics of the business?
Probably born out in the types of company that we're investing in. They're quite easy to get your head around.
Yes.
Marine, EV business. Okay, I get that. I understand that.
Right.
As opposed to some hard to handle, hard to get to grips with tech company with a kind of esoteric type idea. Good Club, the ethical supermarket. Okay, that's easy to understand. I get it. It's contributing to climate change. It's going to make the world better by making that investment and by adopting that kind of shopping.
They sound very. I mean, the environments you're in at the minute, they appear to be very scale. They scale quite elegantly, if I can use that term.
Yeah.
Because of that simplicity. So in some respects, a no-nonsense, feels-fair sort of environment for straightforward, no-nonsense investment, really. It comes across. It's quite unique.
It's very rewarding to see the penny drop with people when they start to get, okay, so this isn't charitable. Okay, you're addressing climate change, and there's also a bloody great opportunity. And I think it's really rewarding when you see the penny dropping with people. We had a series, we're on an investor roadshow last week, and I think seeing what I'd call some traditional IFAs actually sit there and go, okay, I think I'm really getting this now. It's not just, I need to allocate 10% of this person's portfolio to the environment. They're starting to kind of get it in a different way, and I think that's really rewarding. Yes, we do spend more time on it. Like I said, we're on the phone the other day, someone called up, thinking making a 10k application to invest. I mean, I don't know, do other funds spend time on that? I don't think so. We really enjoy it. We spent a long time trying to explain to that person just about why we do it, why we're excited about the current investments. It's really rewarding. So
that's interesting, isn't it? Because you could, as One Planet, you could have almost like an incubation model there somewhere on the journey. Which
totally.
We're open to that. That could happen. Yeah, that's something that we think. And again, thinking about about your own business.
Yes.
I'd really encourage. There's so much scope for more senior executives from large trade, great expertise, come to the market, that could be a real model in future where there's mentorship programs. We think there's always great power if those people can invest into the company as well. And then you can experiment and see there could be some flexible models of involvement, having a stake in the business. We'd love to build that. It's a bit early stage, but
all these businesses are crying out for senior talent, but
absolutely.
In most cases they can't afford to pay
for
5 days a week.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, not to get too abracadabra about this today, but that's exactly so. If we talk about the people, the business, and the mission that you're on, I mean, we're in the people business here at Zengility and EgoStream, and it's quite interesting listening to you that you're creating that environment. So we're sitting here like almost brokering individuals that are saying, I'd love to work with a young entrepreneur that is at the incubation stage that needs that little steer. And maybe you need to, pardon the language, a few quid just to help him on the journey in readiness for One Planet, so he can turn up and be ready for that. And maybe that's something we take offline, have a bit more of a conversation about. But no, it's very real. I think we are in those they're incredible times, and I think that, this time next year, there's a high probability you're going to have a whole raft of different investments on the go. I mean, is there a sort of a boutique feel to this business, or is it? Where are you on that? Is it exponential growth, or is it considered? I mean, what's your thoughts around that? Because green's a big word, right?
Yeah, I think we're lucky that we don't feel the commercial pressure that the fund has to double every 6 months in size, etc.
Nice. Yeah.
We're very thankful that we're in a place in life where the next fundraise does a bit more than the last one, but we feel like we're building the fund in the right way and investing in the right companies, then we can take that time. So I think that's the important thing and we feel very privileged that we're not driven. The fund doesn't have to double in size to make it economically viable. We invest our own money. We don't take salaries. We're looking to do this in the right way. So I think it's a gentle process to make sure we maintain the right impact, as opposed to the criteria has to be that it's doubling the business very quickly.
By the same token, though, we want to ensure that our impact on the environment is such that we are making our contribution towards net zero. So it will be a function of size and scale, and the more money we have, the more impact we can make, the more investments we can make. So sort of double-edged.
How much, right now, if we said, we want to raise some more capital next year, what does that look like? Or this year, 22, at the beginning of the year? How much more are you going to aim to try and attract?
It's as much as possible, really. I don't think we need to put a number on it.
Okay.
Per se, it's really as much as we can find, and there are lots of businesses crying out for investment.
Right.
So the usual benchmark you hear for like a first year of a fund, if you could raise something between 1 and 2 million, that's good progress, and then you look to obviously grow that. Looks like we're going to be ahead of that, and we'd be really encouraged to do so. And like Ed said, there is that kind of dynamic of the more we do raise, the more we can take more prominent roles in a business and help really influence and sort of accelerate companies. So that's a consideration, but I think we'll be really excited to close the first year above £2.5 million, and then hopefully get to 5 for the following year would be like the arbitrary targets. But like I said, we're patient. We've got some leeway to make the right choices on the way.
So it's nice you're taking a very, I wouldn't say aggressive, but you're taking a really nice considered approach to how you methodically sort of, one, identifying, calculating your decisions, supporting the initiatives you're getting involved with. It's a very embracing, refreshing tonic to hear from the investment world. And, it's nice to hear that sort of artery of your core values and your principles of practice are lining up very, very nicely. And I think that in itself is very magnetic. And the reason I speak like that is because I'm, being candid, it's been a tough year, 20, 30 years of exponential growth. And, we've had the party and now we're paying for it, so to speak. And clearly this whole initiative that we're all up against is all about just that. And it's nice to hear the simplicity of the model. It's very nice to hear the feels fair friendly approach. The initiatives are super cool. I mean, you've put money in wise places. They're very easy to administer growth. They're very a little bit B2C like, so it's the more flour you sell from, the environment piece is super easy to observe. Everybody gets it. Pardon the language, but your grandma getting off the bus would understand the elevator pitch, which is also in the wider world of investment and working with entrepreneurs. If it's complicated, not quite sure. I mean, the maths might look good, but not sure there's an appetite for this. So they're very nichey and quite cool environments, which I think is. Which is really good. But the reason I say this is because, from my world, and somewhere on this journey supporting your world, I'm talking to senior execs that want this. You're pushing against an open door. They want to come from the hedonistic side of, dare I say, investment and involvement, but into a more feels fair friendly world that's got purpose and meaning and truth to it. Dare I say, authentic environments, which is what this is all about, isn't it? I mean, One Planet stands for all of these sort of nice, wonderful business ethics, which is good. And I think if you go crazy on growth, you can lose that. It's the classic, isn't it? You can lose your identity on the journey through classic capitalism. And I wouldn't say this is classic capitalism. I think this is more life supportive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think... like many of your listeners, I mean, I've gone on a journey where I spent the last 20 years in a corporate environment, worked in large public companies. I ran a number of private equity-backed businesses as CEO, and sort of completely lost my soul partially on the journey. And
well, at least you admit it, Anthony. At least you admit it. Nice to hear you.
And I think it can be cumbersome transitioning, but again, I think we've got an opportunity here with your audience and your readership to say, look, that there are businesses out there crying out for support and experience that your audience has, and it can be cumbersome making the transition. But it's not a charitable endeavour. There are commercial opportunities here as well. There is huge intellectual stimulation. I've never felt more energised personally.
Really?
I've been privileged to be involved in international companies, technology enabled, faced a lot of challenges in, let's say, my traditional corporate career. But I haven't learnt as much as I have done in the last 9 months working and visiting with some of the companies we're involved with, and thinking about how these companies can go and dominate a market, disrupt industries, because there's a lot of disruption in what we're doing. We talk about all the technology disruption that's happened over the last decade, but there's now large disruption coming to these markets from the environmental point of view as well. So, passionate to see more experienced business people come into this market. I think that could be compelling.
Yeah. But yes, definitely. I think technology is now enabling us to leisureize our lives appropriately. I think we're now becoming more conscious about our decisions. I think we're now sort of thinking twice about how we do what we do in the way that we do it. And I think One Planet, and coming back to your brand name, you couldn't have got it better. It's very encompassing, if that makes sense. It makes us in it together, and it's really, really cool to hear that your practice is feeling nice and authentic.
Yeah, I think it feels like the most common sense thing in the world that actually we've been abusing this planet for a long period of time. And you were talking about, where some of this traction's starting to happen. I mean, I think even like kids of today growing up now
Right.
Are growing up with that awareness, no confusion around it, realising about the consequences of their behaviours, the way they live their lives. And that's really powerful, because then I think there's an influence back to parents, and actually that's why this generation is starting to make some change. Governments are serious. Like every action you take this year, I mean, travelling into London nowadays is difficult because of the number of, the congestion charge, the ultra low emission zone. There's plastics taxes coming in next year. There's real genuine kind of pressure to make this change. You said before about, some of this, is it too much? And I think we do see that with the companies we meet.
Right.
Where actually you'll see a flurry of ideas come to market, 5 businesses all trying to crowd a market, say they're going to create a huge impact, and actually starting to now go the other direction of having to work harder to sift out some of those companies. There's a bit of heat coming into the market.
Right.
And again, I think that's something we're wary of. We've seen it with a few sectors that suddenly there's 5-6 pitch decks come in a week for the same sort of concept.
Interesting.
And it's trying to scratch at the surface and make sure we're not
some of the
overpricing.
valuations as well.
Yeah, very much so.
That's an interesting dynamic, because that's the thought process I've been through this week. And I remember 5 years ago talking a story around technology businesses spawning like jellyfish. And at the time, the dinner I was hosting was with an Olympic athlete about wellness in the workplace. So the engine of it was all about competition. And I'm pleased to hear what you've said, because you have to select wisely, because it is a saturated market. And it's the concept of the jellyfish. It constantly, there's more and more and more coming out. And I think what I really, really like about One Planet is that pace. You're not in a rush. You've got a calculation. You've got, there's like at the helm of what you're doing, it's this almost like we're backing sustainable growth, but not at any price, which I quite like.
We have to select the right horse.
Absolutely right.
Within each industry and sub-industry.
And it's nice to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I come back to essentially what your audience is in your business, that, to us, it feels like good common sense that, if you're used to making decisions in large environments, corporate background, that these things, moving into that more investment discipline, actually it's still trying to apply some of that common sense that, as Ed said, I mean, we've seen one market, 5 companies, all crazy valuations, and there was just common sense about, well, actually there's not a lot of barriers to entry, is at the right time, and we were quite happy to move away. But yeah, I wonder over the next 5 years that there is some risk around a bit of a bubble as people pivot very quickly to this area. But
I think it's an interesting one as well, because I come from the performance world, particularly with my business ego stream, where I've been working with sales, driven business strategies for like 25 years. And my sort of barometer saying this year, particularly in tech, core technology businesses, there's going to be a performance challenge, because there's a lot of social unrest, just social unrest. That's going to filter into the work environment. So, I'm experiencing, forecasting with current clients right now. It's a bit of a work of art. It's difficult, when you're measuring your business on a quarter by quarter basis. And I don't want to talk too much about numbers, but my point of the matter is that there is just too much of, certain technologies out there. And if you look at the buyer and the supplier dynamic, loads of suppliers, limited buyers, that by default is going to create problems. So there's going to be a big shakeout. Then you put the human endeavor behind that. You've got your classic sales models that you're trying to drive growth and all the rest of it. Unless you get your plans in place that are really wise plans, you're going to run distressed business models. So burnout, there's a big subject in the world right now about, wellness in the workplace, mental health in the workplace, all of these sort of core things that new world leaders are now needing to embrace as they calculate their trajectories of sustainable growth ethically and in all the right ways. It's complicated. It's complicated because of the classic hedonistic, egotistical, stuff. I mean, you're not in it. You're separated out. You're wise to it, and you've had tons of experience at it because, you don't work for corporate PLC or PE businesses. Being candid with you, without that sort of tension. But right now, what I'm really trying to say is it's a saturated market and will continue to do so. So by default, you're quite right, Anthony. I think within 5 years' time, it's going to be an interesting dynamic of shakeout. But this year, I see performance in a lot of businesses flatlining. Not for common reason, they just can't break through into the areas they think they can because they've got too hedonistic technically. We've got the next big AI sort of sales and marketing lead generation machine. Oh yeah. Now 2 years ago, that was novel. Today, so what? So what?
Yeah. And actually, I think...
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean...
Sorry, carry on.
The businesses I think we're finding ourselves most attracted to aren't the ones that put crazy numbers and expansion in front of you. I think we try to look for stuff that's more credible and a bit more realistic. And I think you do start to see what I call now the classic polished founder who can absolutely sell you the story. It's like an interview, and these people just talk you like the perfect story, and and I think there's more of that now, and there's more of a challenge to, we try and do this when we do due diligence on businesses. We're trying to take a different approach and scratch at the surface in a different way. So we spend a lot of time referencing, speaking to people in the industry to get underneath the skin, because you do get these very polished people trying to sell you the exponential story and how it's all unique, and it's a real risk for us actually of getting too drawn into some of that.
Well, it's actually quite interesting, that word unique, because I think it's unique for 3 days. You've had the pace of change. I mean, this is real. Yeah. But I love pardon the language, the bread and butter investments you're making, the classics. Yeah. Serving the community with, it's nice to hear that, because that feels like simple but equally nice and scalable.
Yeah,
gentle.
Almost like common sense type.
Correct.
Businesses.
Like wisdom.
Sometimes you get businesses who have created a fix for a problem that doesn't really exist or will never exist.
Yeah.
And they've created something, just invented something out of living in a bubble for too long.
And generally, we've invested into companies that have already been making revenues for a couple of years. That gives us some confidence, there's some credibility, there's some real fit there. And again, I think you can get this type of feel from the management teams that you speak to as well. Like Ed said, a good, sensible kind of product or service in the market. The stuff we shy away from, that's at the more risky end of the spectrum. It's not that we won't look at that type of investment in future, but didn't feel like the right place to start the fund.
Also, I think we have to get whatever business we're poised to invest in. We wouldn't venture into areas where we don't have any kind of relatable expertise. I think to do that would be dangerous. So we stick to what we know, or what we can relate to, or what we can due diligence properly.
And I think that's a really nice tone for the investor. Because we understand the business, you've done your due diligence at the right levels, you've built the right relationships in the right ways, you've calculated, it's attractive. And I think that you're coming from those business backgrounds is really a major advantage for One Planet. I passionately believe that. What's your, if you don't mind me saying, what's your founders think of you and your CEOs of your current portfolio? I
think we're a bit.
You've done a survey.
No, we're definitely different. I think that's the feedback.
Is it
so far? Yeah, because they're used to dealing with hardened VC type investors come in and start banging you on the head about valuation, and we generally go in and listen, hear about the business, empathise on some areas.
Yeah. But I mean, we're very methodical, process driven. I think they appreciate the level of work and effort that goes into an investment that we make. We take the time to really dig into a business. I think that's important for our investors, but also for them to know that if we do invest, we will be a partner for the ride.
It's nice to feel that is a partnership demonstrated. It's a word that often gets used and under practiced, candidly. My big word around partners and the likes now is collaboration and co-creation, working together for the greater good, and that comes across. I mean, you're not, but you feel like a family business. We're an artisan practice. We're niche, we're very good at what we do, and we do it wisely, and we're prudent about who we select to work with. And I think that's super for anybody listening today that want to invest in the portfolio for today or tomorrow. And equally, any entrepreneurs sitting listening here that are kind of, this is a company I should be talking to. And I'll tell you why, is because from my experience, genuinely, and you know this as well, often it's a fearful exercise for an entrepreneur. If he's doing it for the first time, he's got a fantastic product or proposition. Approaching the investment community, it can be a real daunting experience. And I think you guys offer a very different experience. And like I say, it's very front room, if you don't mind me saying. It's very homely. And I really like that. I warm to that. And that was, pardon the language, but it was part of our selection criteria. We didn't want JP Morgan sat there. Nothing wrong with them, but there's probably nothing right with them actually. But you know what I'm trying to say.
What works is we're like-minded people, right?
Absolutely.
So, like in particular, Ed and Matt, they come from a background of having set up 6-7 startups over the last decade, successfully exited as well, which pleased to say. But I think when you sit in front of other founders and they can understand you've been on the same journey, there's an empathy and an understanding there, and I think some credibility, right? Because we've also been there and
you have. I mean, Ed's been on Dragon's Den. I don't want to promote it too much, and but you survived. Right? and actually, you got your funding from what I hear. So that's
I did. That's a long time ago now. But going back to the companies and the founders, they get the benefit of our mistakes along the way. Yeah, we can help them not repeat those mistakes, and that's extremely important. Invaluable.
I think it is. I mean, I had a classic question when I've been working with businesses, which I'm sure you'll endorse, is, it's all right having these really lovely hedonistic plans. I've got one question with a plan. What will fail the plan? And if you can't tell me what will fail the plan, that isn't a plan because it has to come from a number of perspectives. And it's nice to hear that rich expertise is on hand.
That's one of the questions you always ask, Anthony, isn't it?
Where does it go wrong?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where are the speed bumps?
What's keeping you up at night? And actually, we spend quite a lot of time talking about that in due diligence because, again, it comes back to that point of how honest some of the people are on the teams, that if they're, what we like is someone will look at you and actually quite bluntly say, well, there's 2 or 3 things that really worry me. And that if these things don't work in the coming year, the business doesn't work out.
And if they say nothing, they're either deluded or lying. So
and actually
there's always something.
Easy.
There's a real great link between those people who think through all of those things and they're honest about it with the ones that we've invested in, and I think
I think that's important, because one of the things I've experienced, particularly with invested environments, is coming back to that classic, what keeps you awake at night? Literally stress. If you look at some of the pressures that, pardon the language, that investors can put on companies, I've seen it, and I'm sure we've all experienced it with one guise or another, but, that pressure can actually often really floor a plan. I know I've worked with CEOs over the years that have limped from one board meeting to the next because of that significant pressure. And somewhere on that journey, somebody made a bad decision. Maybe shouldn't have gone into the fund, or, haven't done the right level of due diligence because they're running a distressed business model. And there's nothing worse for all parties. But, it's nice to hear that you head all that stuff off best you can at the earliest point. So it's not just about closing the deal out. It's about selection.
Yeah, and I emphasise again, if there's any founders of businesses listening, but I just recommend speak to as many investment houses as possible before you start raising. Go and listen to what their feedback is. Really try and learn all those lessons, because if you then go to market sort of half prepared, you might get done, in terms of poor valuation and a number of other issues. And I really enjoy speaking to people saying we're not quite there yet. Might be in a year's time. They show you a pitch deck, you talk it through. It's really happy to offer any input. And the more that there's people from industry in this environment, I think the better that will get.
Yeah, I think that's nice. It's a nice message to send out. So I think for our listeners, if anybody is out there that's got a budding proposition, step forward. These guys are very open-hearted and very happy to have the conversation. And once again, that's great. And that will continue. It's very clear that is your, dare I say, your unique, your edge. Be human, be natural, and be on point. And that's how I would assess what you're transmitting as a one planet. And it is super fresh to hear, genuinely. And you kind of you see everything in your own image. So I suppose it's a day in the life for you. But from my perspective, it isn't actually, because I do see all the other angles that I suppose over your journeys you've both independently and collectively experienced. But it's nice to hear a friendly investment environment that is here to support, one, wise investment, but two, have that sort of huge human empathy wrapper around it. Because, truth can be spoken, right? Truth can be spoken. So, your board meetings or whatever as you go forward, they're not board meetings, they're table meetings. You're breaking bread, you're working together. And it's important, and I think I've picked that up as part of your philosophy, which is seriously fresh, I've got to say. So with that in mind, I'd just like to say, Silent Ego, the soul of the entrepreneur, it's been an absolute roaring pleasure to have you guys on here for One Planet. And any of our listeners, viewers, step forward, guys. From an investment perspective, these guys are the genuine thing. And any entrepreneurs out there looking for funding, be prepared to go through a very rigorous but friendly process.
It will be fun.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.